everybody. Welcome back to Storm Champ. This is Storm Champ, the podcast that tries to help a little bit in the world by talking to different people about their journeys and the storms that they went through and how they got through it. We are super excited today to talk to Danielle Daily from the Suddenly Single podcast, who has a really, really kind of interesting story about going through a pretty rough storm in her life and kind of how she got through it. So, Danielle, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. So let's start from the beginning. I read a little bit through your bio and, I'm thinking back to 2015 and you're on the eve of a TED Talk, which is pretty awesome. And I actually really want to hear about that and what that was like. But something happened the night before a TED Talk. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh my goodness. So yeah, for anybody who's ever done a TEDx talk, you know that it is basically like a full-time job preparing for that. You put all of your mental and emotional energy into making sure that you're going to show up your best because this is your big moment. It's going to be out on the internet in perpetuity. So you want to do really well. So fortunately for me, when that axe moment came that I will tell people about in a moment, I had weeks of practice under my belt. And if it hadn't been for that, I don't know that I would have been able to do what I did next. So 48 hours before I was to get on stage and deliver this talk that I'd been preparing months for, I came home to divorce papers taped to my front door.
Wow.
I had been served.
Wow.
And it was one of those moments in life where it's almost like you're out of body. You just can't really process what's happening in a really real way. But I remember the smell of the tape and the paper. That's like the memory is of the scent of what it was like, and pulling it off the door and going inside. And then hearing my mother's voice in my head. We all have those people from our past who sort of coach us through life. And my mom isn't in my past, but I heard her from my past saying, honey, things will look better in the morning. And sort of laughing like an insane person because I was like, Mom, you've given me a lot of good advice in my life. And I'm pretty sure these papers are not going to look better in the morning.
Right.
But I ended up just taking the papers and putting them on the kitchen island and deciding I was going to get on with my evening and the things that I had to do. I was going to go to sleep and I was going to wake up in the morning and hopefully things were going to be better. And when I woke up in the morning, no, things were not better. But I decided that I was going to give the talk anyway, even though what I really wanted to do was just stay home, cry, I didn't want to function. I did not want to continue moving forward in the trajectory that my life was currently going at. But I just had this sense inside me or this voice inside me that kept telling me, if you can do this, you can do anything. If you can get up off your knees in this horrific moment, the worst moment of your life so far and hopefully ever, you will know your own power for the rest of your life. You will know that no matter what life throws at you, you will be able to get up and do what it is that you intend to do. And so it was a really powerful moment in my life. And looking back, I'm actually grateful for it.
Absolutely. So, I'm trying to think through that moment, and most people would, in that situation, in that moment, would crumble, right? So talk to me about everything a little bit leading up to that. So, and there's so much I want to unpack here. Did you know it was coming? Or was it a complete surprise?
So in Virginia, you actually have to be separated before you can file a complaint for divorce.
Right.
So I did know that we were not on the same path.
Sure.
But I didn't know that I was going to come home to be served that day.
Right.
Oh my gosh, if it could have just waited like a week, right? What a better situation that would have been.
Right.
But what helped me be able to not crumble in that moment was I didn't pretend that I was okay. I didn't put on a mask that said, my life is amazing. I'm giving a TEDx talk. Isn't this great? I actually went to my family first and then to my social media community. And I said, look, this is what's happened. This is how I feel about it, which is crappy. And this is what I need you guys to do for me so that I can go forward with what I've planned to do. And what that is I need to set the timer on your phone for 1 minute. And I want you to close your eyes and I want you to imagine me getting on that stage.
Right.
And everybody I knew just responded so positively. They were like, yes, we'll do that. And there were people who sent prayers. There were people who sent good vibes. There were people who sent angels to stand over me. Whatever it was they believed in that was powerful and would assist me, they sent to me. And that is how I was able to do it. Not because I'm so strong and I just, put my big girl pants on and got on with it. It was because people rose up to support me, and I knew I couldn't manage trying to keep a mask on and also do the thing that I'd set out to do. And even when I got to the event, the other speakers knew what I was going through and rose up to support me. There were people there all day who were like, do you need to talk? What do you need? And I was just like, no, I don't need to talk. I just need you guys to know, and then to help me make sure that I get up there and that I do the thing that I said I was going to do.
So it was that community and
Yeah.
that the folks that kind of came together to help you out. That's super
Ab-
important, right? And so what's really interesting then, there has to have been though a little bit of strength within you though to be able to even, number one, reach out, because I think a lot of people would just like not even talk about it, right? So you were self-aware enough to know like you couldn't hide it. So what allowed you to have that self-awareness?
So I have a long practice of trying to learn about myself and what will support me and what I need. So when I sat there and I thought about how can I make this happen? Because what I really want is to make this happen. My intuition just said, well, you have two choices. You can either tell people and get the support you need, or you can hold back and not be able to do the thing. Those
Right.
are your two choices. And I just was so determined because I knew that this was a peak moment in my career, and that voice that had told me that if I could do this, I could do anything. It didn't say if you can do it alone, you can do
Right.
anything.
Right.
It
Right.
said if you can do it. And that was important to me because I don't think in order to be strong that you have to do things alone.
No, absolutely not. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of people make, and myself included, was, you're going through a rough phase of life or part of life, and you think no one else understands or no one else has been through it, or my situation is so unique. And the reality is it's probably not as unique as you think it is, right? That's a lot of ego talking. But then you end up internalizing it. You don't ask for help, and it actually ends up being worse for you in the long run. I think the important distinction though is like, you're not going to necessarily, no one's going to save you, right? You're going to save yourself, but it doesn't mean you can't get help to get to
Right,
that right point, right?
right.
So what do you, for folks that are going through that moment right now, right? I'm sure there's somebody out there listening is like, going through a really rough patch of divorce, or, something else is happening in their life. Like what do you tell them? Like how do you help them get through that moment?
Uh, well, my best advice is find somebody that you trust to open up to. You don't necessarily have to do what I did and open up to your entire social community, but find someone you can open up to. And maybe you're not fortunate enough to have a trusted family member like a mom or a sister that you can talk to. Maybe you need to find somebody who's a professional, not because you need, quote, professional help, but because you need a safe place to be able to dump whatever it is you're feeling, so that you can unburden yourself a little bit and have somebody who knows what you're going through.
Right.
It's so important not to just buckle it down and think, I have to handle this on my own, because then you're sort of defending whatever the situation is, and then you're also defending anybody knowing about it. And when you split your energies like that, you're just not as effective. It's almost like fighting a war, right? If you're
Yeah.
fighting a war on two fronts, you're probably going to lose.
Right.
So just focus your energies on getting through whatever it is, and let someone help you do that so that you're not having to put up so many walls.
So you get past the TED talk, you get it. Done successfully. What was the topic about?
So, my topic was excavating new possibilities. I have an educational background in anthropology and archaeology, and I was talking about how I took my education in that field and applied it in a different context. And without going into a whole lot of background on something I don't do anymore, I had created something called the purse process, where I was excavating what's inside women's handbags. And through research, I had developed these archetypes or prototypes of personalities and things that we do based on the stuff that we have. And I gave them fun names like Dumpster Debbie and Vanishing
Oh.
Veronica. So I came up with this incredible archetype system, and it was based off of three very basic principles that you learn in an archaeology 101 textbook. And that is, items have meaning. Anything we have has a meaning. And
Right.
items in relationship to one another have meaning. So a pencil next to a piece of paper has meaning, or a pencil next to a cassette tape has a different meaning. And then if you find items in their original context in which they're used, they're able to convey even more meaning. So finding those things on a desk versus finding those things in a parking lot, it gives you different information. There's all this amazing information available to you through the quote artifacts of our life. And I had just taken that and made it really fun and girly by using that system to look at, well, what is it that women are carrying in their bags, and what does that say about, their mental and emotional state and how they make decisions.
That's interesting too. Like, sorry, I don't want to dive too much into this, but it is pretty cool because, like, did you ever look at patterns over time? Like, if you're because you change over time, right? So the things in your bag may change too, and over time, right?
Absolutely. So it's a living archaeological record that is constantly evolving. That's really what a woman's handbag is. And one of the reasons I stopped doing it was because I got very frustrated with the people receiving the information, thinking, well, if I change my bag, that means I've changed. And really,
Yeah.
the message I was trying to get across to women, especially, was when you change inside, that your outward reflection, whether that's what's in your bag or what's in your house or what you wear or the car you drive or the people you hang out with, those things evolve. And it's really all about the person inside rather than the actual stuff. And I felt like I was beating my head against the wall trying to get people to understand that. And I got tired of people asking me if I sold handbags.
Oh,
so,
yeah, that's funny.
so I put the purse process away, but it's something I'm very proud of that I developed. It got me on the TEDx stage, and it got me on a path that is, somewhere I never thought I would be.
So, getting past the TED Talk and looking at your own patterns in your life, and obviously at this point, those patterns are going to change because of the divorce, right? So, talk to me about this next couple of months of, like, wow, this is really going to happen, and now I've got to kind of rebuild myself. What was that like?
Yeah, it was really hard. I did not start to rebuild myself right away. But what I did do was I started writing even more. I've always loved to write, but I started writing even more. And about 2 weeks after my TEDx talk, give or take, it would have been my husband's 40th birthday.
Mm.
And we had been together since I was 19, he was 23, and I had been so excited to celebrate his 40th birthday for so many years, and I wasn't going to get to.
Right.
And so it was interesting because that day I ended up talking to myself in the mirror like a crazy person. And I had all these positive, loving words come out. And I said things like, I'm so proud of the way you're handling yourself. And even in adversity, you're an incredible human being. And the words that I said felt so powerful. I decided I want to write these down, and I want to write them down in a place where I know I'll be reminded of them regularly. So where did I go? Of course, Facebook, because Facebook
Right.
brings up memories every year. So I typed up what I had said and I posted it publicly. And friends just responded so positively. They were like, "Oh, I love this. This is so great." I even had one woman who said, "Can I print this out and put it on my bathroom mirror? I want to read it over and over." And getting that positive feedback from people was just so nurturing for me at the time. I really needed to hear that I was good and that I was
Right.
doing something good in the world and I was making a difference and that I was being seen and heard even in my pain.
Right.
And so the next day I wrote another one. I was just writing these little notes, and I called them note to self. It was dear self, and then some kind of thing that I'd learned that day or something, and then love me. And they were really for me, and I was doing it publicly because I needed that feedback
Sure.
of being seen.
Sure.
So after months and months of doing this and the wonderful, what is it? not cortisol hit, but the opposite of that. The good feeling hormones that release in your body when you get positive feedback. After months of that, I suddenly realized, you know what? If I wrote one of these every single day for a year, I'd have a book.
Yep.
And so that led me to becoming an author, which had been a lifelong dream of mine that I had never really done anything about. Yes, I'd written lots of writing, but never a whole book.
Right.
And so it was so funny when I finished the book to look back and go, the most horrid experience in my life gave me the gift of something that I'd always dreamed of.
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
what's the book about?
So the book is called Dear Self, I Love You, Keep Going. And it's simply a collection of all of those notes, the 365 notes that I wrote to myself. And then there's a foreword that talks a little bit about why I wrote the book. And then at the end, I say, I'm still not 100%, but I'm just really proud of myself. And when I read those notes, I'm just like, wow, these are so incredible. They're all original quotes. And to have written 365 of those is just, I inspire myself, which sounds like egomania, but it's really not. It's just this great feeling of, wow, what an incredible thing. There's that saying that when life squeezes you, you get to see sort of what's inside of you by the juice that comes out. And I'm like, wow, when life squeezed me, something amazing came out. And that's a good feeling.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to write 365 days in a row, like that's incredible, right? So tell me about the writing process. Like, what did that do for you to kind of help you through the healing and through the journey?
Yeah, so something I didn't know until after I was done was that if you look at the notes as a collection, you can see my emotional journey and my process. You can see that in the beginning, I'm hurting.
Right.
And then you can see a little bit further on that I'm feeling hopeful. And then a little bit further on, you can see that I'm starting to heal a little bit. And what I love about the notes the most is that I'm not positioning them as wisdom, like here's what you do and
Right.
here's how you. I'm really just providing a narrative of what it looks like to encourage yourself. This isn't wisdom. This is encouragement. This is like how you talk to yourself in a way that allows you to keep inching forward, even if you were on your knees, bloody, with your army crawl going on.
Right.
You just telling yourself that it may not be okay today, but someday I'm really looking forward to it being okay. It doesn't even mean that I believe it'll be okay. It's just like I'm looking forward to somehow processing this and it being okay. And sometimes that's what you have to do. I think people oftentimes go too far and they try to lie to themselves and say, I'm okay with this, or this is going to be fine, when they really don't feel that way.
Right.
But if you dial it back a little bit and say, I'm looking forward to the day sometime in the future, ha ha ha, I don't really believe it, when I will be fine with this, it really helps your mental and emotional state.
Absolutely.
To just be truthful with yourself about it.
And there's so much power in the written word, right? Like you're articulating it, you're getting it out there. I know it's helped me. Like I started journaling a lot, and like you said, to be able to look back and like, oh wow, like I remember when this happened and I remember how I felt, and I see the progression on how much farther I've been able to come along. And there's a certain amount, there's a power in putting it out there to the world, but there's also, you're taking your power back from that thing that's happening to you. Right. And I'm a big fan of Brene Brown, and she's got this whole concept of the shitty first draft. And and that's how I write my journal entries now, especially if I'm having a rough day. It's like, SFD, and like, here's what I'm thinking, and here's the story I'm telling myself. And like, when you do that and then you look back on it, it's like, yeah, this is the wrong story. Like I shouldn't, there's a lot of assumptions or false expectations or whatever about this thing. And when you get it out there, it's like, you can take that step back and look at it more objectively, and be like, okay, this is what I need to do instead. Or this is how I can be better in this moment instead. So much power in it.
One of the things about writing that I would encourage people who are trying to get through something to do is to make it that daily practice, to have it be, because it doesn't have to be involved. You don't have to write 500 words. You could just write one word every day, maybe that triggers a memory or that feels good or it, encapsulates what happened to you that day, or it could be a cuss word,
Yeah,
whatever it
yeah,
is,
yeah.
just one word and just writing it down so that you're doing it on a daily practice as a daily practice, because when you do that, you gain this incredible momentum that you can't get by starting and stopping things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's so empowering, and just like you said, to be able to look back and see your progress, right? Because I think a lot of times we don't think we're making progress in our own journey, and when you look back on it, it's like, oh wow, I've come such a long way. You just got
Yeah.
to be patient and be grateful for the journey that took you to get there, right?
Yep.
So the book happened, and
Hmm.
so you've got a podcast now called the Suddenly Single Podcast. So tell me a little bit about the genesis of that podcast.
Yeah, so this is so interesting. I don't know how woo woo our listeners are, but the idea for the Suddenly Single Show podcast was one of those things that some people would call a download from the universe. It was just something that came to me in a flash. And not only did the name of the podcast come to me, but all the copy for the website. So the About Me page, what the show was about, all of the information I needed to make the Suddenly Single Show reality. It was like somebody FedExed a package into my brain.
Right.
And so I started right away to develop it because I am a doer. I have an idea, I get going on it. So I went through all the steps, including getting the first episode on iTunes back in I think it was 2015 or 2016. I'd have to look back, but I did it then. And then it was like I had been sailing it along at this amazing clip, and then all the wind went out of my sails. And I was so confused at the time. I was like, this doesn't make sense. I've had this amazing idea from the universe, and I've done everything I'm supposed to do to cooperate with that and make it real.
Right.
And so I thought, you know what? Maybe I've just worked too hard. Maybe I just need a little break. I've just taken inspiration a little too far.
Right.
So for a month, I took the time off and just didn't work on it at all, didn't record any more episodes, didn't even push myself to, just kind of put it on the shelf in my mind. And a month later, I was like, no, I still don't have any more inspiration for this. I'm really confused. Gave it a couple more weeks. And then finally, I was like, you know what? I got other things going on in my life right now. I'm not going to beat myself up about this. Whatever it was, I put that together. I have no idea why, but it will serve me somehow, some way. I've really learned that life is about the long game,
Right.
and you
Absolutely.
don't always know how something's going to circle back around. So then in 2018, the show started popping around in the back of my head again. It would knock at, different times of the day and night. And I was like, okay, I'd like to do that again, but I'm a little afraid because I put all that energy into it and then it just went away. But I was having coffee with a friend and we were talking about how I was thinking about doing it. And he looked at me and he just dead in the eye and was like, Danielle, I know exactly why you didn't keep doing that podcast back at that time. And I was like, why? And he said, because you were too much in your own pain at the time to listen to other people's stories the way that you do now.
Mm,
The way that you hold space for people to just share what is on their heart and in their minds is not something that you would have been able to do when everything they said hurt your very bruised and bloodied heart. And once I had healed from that, I was in a place to not make it about me or not, reflect on, well, how might that apply to what happened in my case? I'm just able
right.
to sit there and be like, I understand what it is like to be in that place, but this is about their story, not about me. And so I basically just restarted everything. It's as if the show never started in 2015, but I like to tell that story because I think as creative people, sometimes we go for something and then we beat on ourselves. We think, oh, I have shiny object syndrome, but that's not always the case. Sometimes there's a piece of the puzzle that didn't fall into place at that time, and you'll be able to come back around to that thing. And having this podcast has just been such an incredible experience because even though I've been a popular guest on other people's shows for 5, 6 years now, I'd never had my own show, and I actually swore I never would because I know exactly how much work it is. But it has opened so many doors for me
Right.
to really recognize how much I enjoy listening to other people's stories, to understand why Oprah loved her job so much because she just got to talk to people all the time. It has opened doors for for me to do more writing and publishing articles. I got on the cover of a magazine because of my podcast. Just incredible, incredible opportunities. And I'm positive none of that would have happened if I had forced myself to continue creating those interviews and that content back when I wasn't ready. It would have been, that SFD, but in like the worst possible way.
Right.
Because once it's out there, you can't pull it back. It's not like it's in your journal. A podcast is certainly you could delete it, but there are people who are going to have it. So I'm glad that I waited until I was in a place where I could really produce something that matters and isn't just more noise.
That's such an interesting self-awareness kind of epiphany, right? When he said that to you, because you didn't even realize it yourself, that's exactly what had happened, right?
Yeah,
and so
no.
you're like, wow, that's exactly what happened.
That
and
is.
so
Yeah.
that got the ball rolling again. So
Yep.
now the show, it's a weekly show, right?
It's a weekly show. Yep. It comes out every Monday and it's all interview based. And, the name, the Suddenly Single Show, is one of those names that's really fun because you tune in thinking you're going to hear about single life. But
Right.
instead, what you hear about is inspiring stories from people who at some time in the past found themselves suddenly single, divorced, death, dumped, had to leave a relationship. But what we're focusing the interview on is not about when they were single. It's what they learned and how they grew through one of life's common plot twists. Heartbreak is the universal human experience. So how did they get through it? What did they do? Who did they meet? How did they feel about it? Helping people listen to those, helping people by giving those stories as an example of how to make it to that other side where now they're living a better life, they're happier, maybe they're even remarried. And the listeners are those people who are like, my heart is broken, life is horrible. They need to hear those stories of people who are like, I've been there. Actually, it was worse. I've interviewed a woman whose husband had committed murder. I've interviewed people who have been victims of domestic violence, and that ended them up suddenly single. And they talk about how they got through it. And there's not a single person who's been on my show who doesn't have the ability to look back and go, you know what? I learned this about myself. I grew this way. This incredible thing happened. I met these people. This happened. And now I am in a better place. And I'm glad that I made it through that. It was worth fighting through.
Right, right. And that's super important for people that are going through it that don't see that light at the end of the tunnel, right? They're like, this is never going to end. My heart is never going to be whole again.
Yes.
What has been the number one thing you've learned doing the show?
Oh my gosh. I have learned that everyone has a story. There is not a single human being who could not come on the show and say, I learned this about myself. And maybe it wouldn't be because of the suddenly single context, but everyone has a story where they learn something about themselves. And so I have other ideas for other podcasts that I'd like to do, like Suddenly Fired, Suddenly Homeless. Life throws us all different kinds of plot twists, and we all experience them. And I would love to just ask people questions about what they learned and how they grew through a number of different iterations of that.
I can already see the network, right? The Danielle Daily network, and it's suddenly something, right? That's awesome. You should do it. You should absolutely do it. I think that's a great idea. So as you're going through it, and as you're talking to people that are going through it, what are you finding what's the biggest fear that you had, or that people that you talk to or have throughout that process?
So it's funny. There's an underlying fear that runs through all the interviews that only one person has named. And in the moment when you find yourself suddenly single, the fear is that you're going to be eternally single. And that's why it hurts so much, because you think, oh my gosh, this is going to last forever. This is going to hurt forever. I'm never going to find anyone else. And the evidence just keeps mounting every week with a new interview that's simply not true.
Right.
It will not last forever. It's okay to have that fear because everyone has it, but it's very unlikely that you're going to end up without other love in your life. And that might not look like a relationship. I've interviewed plenty of people who are like, I have no desire to have that, but what I have built is a core group of friends. Or I've I've created other hobbies and relationships that fulfill something that I didn't even know I needed because I was so wrapped up in this horrible relationship that wasn't working.
Right. So you mentioned, and I think a little bit kind of piggybacking off of that, you mentioned on your website that the number one thing you wanted as you grew up was to be happily married. So how do you feel about that now?
Ah, that little girl inside of me still has that dream of being happily married. I really would like to have that. But as I've been out there dating, I'm just like, you know what? I really enjoy being single. I like who I'm becoming. I like the ways that I'm developing. And I think when I got married before, I really just wanted to be married. And
Mm,
happy wasn't as much in my consciousness at that point. And now I really recognize that, yes, I want that kind of partnership. Yes, I want that kind of love, but it needs to be happy. It can't be at the expense of the happiness that I've built on my own.
sure.
It has to add to it.
That is absolutely so critical. I think that's a key piece that people miss when it comes to relationships is there's an expectation that well, if I'm with this person, they're going to make me happy. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you're getting it wrong. Like you got to be happy for you first and then have
Yeah.
somebody add to your happiness. And
Yeah.
that's such a key difference for folks that you just don't really think about because we're these traditional kind of how people think about relationships and it's just we're getting it wrong. Like you got to be happy and good with you first and then be the best version of yourself so you can find that person that's going to help you be even better and vice versa. Such a
Exactly. And when you're in those first throes of pain, you're just looking to get out of pain. And I definitely noticed myself gravitating towards people who would have filled a similar role in my life. Like the things that were uncomfortable, I wouldn't have had to been uncomfortable anymore because it's like, well, now I have somebody to go to dinner with or to watch a movie with or to live with or whatever. So it would have filled those things in.
right.
But I hadn't yet discovered what it was that I really needed that I wasn't getting. I just knew that I didn't want to hurt like that anymore.
So what do you think what's your thoughts around the idea of lack? Like I've been thinking a bit lately about, if something is lacking in life and that's why you're doing the things that you do or attracted to the people you're attracted to whatever like in your experience with all of this and as you're dating again like how do you deal with lack.
So, lack is an interesting thing because it points us to just simply an unmet need. So, what I've learned to do is to look at, okay, what is the need here? And then sort of, I think of it as sort of like rings that go out from my body. So, if I have an unmet need, can I meet that need for myself?
Mm-hmm.
And if I can, then I should put in the work to meet that need for myself. Now, if I can't meet that need for myself, then I look out into, well, can I get that need met through a close friend?
Right.
Okay. No, no. Okay. Do I need to meet somebody new? Do I need to make a new friend? Okay. If that need can't be met there, then I look at, okay, well, is this a need I can only have met in a committed relationship? And I find that like 99% of needs can be met through those other things, through
Right.
myself, through close friends, through new friends. There's a really narrow scope of things that can only be met by that loving partner. And if we stop and take the time to have those needs met in those other ways, we're asking a whole lot less of somebody else, but we're also asking something so much more specific that it makes it easier for us to recognize that someone is that match.
It's interesting too about naming your needs. Like there's a certain
Hmm.
power of that because I think
Hmm.
a lot of times you go unconsciously like I don't really know what I need. But deep
Hmm.
down you know what you need. You're just afraid to ask for it or you're afraid of the
Right.
judgment around it or you feel like you're
Right.
being too selfish if you ask for these things.
Hmm.
So if you can name it, that's so empowering and then okay,
Yeah.
like you said, go through the layers like okay, can I do it
Yep.
myself? Can I do it with a close friend and getting out there and you're right. Like all of a sudden 99% of your needs you're good to go because you've already met them and it's like okay cool these are the super super important ones and and you really can find that person that's going to help you meet those.
And to add to that, this isn't a way that I like to have my needs met, but it is for a lot of my friends. You can also add your pets in there. Can my
Oh,
dog meet this need for me? Can my
interesting.
cat meet? Can my furry friend meet this need for me? Because they can actually meet a lot of needs. I love animals and pets, but It's not really my thing, but I definitely notice other people I know recognizing that there are so many of those needs they think they need from a partner that they can actually get by their dog or their cat. So that's a really interesting thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's super important. So throughout this journey now, kind of looking back and looking to the things that you do today, like what's been that one thing that surprised you that but has helped you in ways that you didn't realize you needed help in?
Oh my gosh, I have just been surprised over and over and over. But I think what has surprised me most is that I can be a lot more independent than I thought I could be. And I really needed to learn that. I really needed to learn to not be terrified of riding the metro myself. I needed to
Mm,
learn to not be afraid to go sit at a bar by myself because I was going to get roofied. Like
yeah,
I had so many anxieties and fears. I'm just a naturally anxious person. And I had to learn that I can be okay out in the world. You got to be smart. Don't do
right.
stupid things. But I can be independent. I don't always need somebody watching out for me or protecting me. I can figure out how to do things on my own.
Yeah, that's super, super important. That's awesome. Yeah, that's really good. So, kind of wrapping up here, where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find the Suddenly Single Show podcast wherever you like to binge podcasts. It's on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, everywhere you can think of. I submitted it to Pandora. I don't know if they're there yet. Also, if you like to stream old school and just hit the play button, it's at suddenlysingleshow.com.
Awesome, awesome, and we'll be sure to link that in all the show posting for this show. So, last question: what's the legacy you want to leave on the world?
You know, I really just want people to like themselves. I really want people to be able to have that narrative in their mind, tell themselves that they're a hero, tell themselves that they're amazing, that they've done good things, that they're a good friend. That was really what writing the book was about, even though I didn't really realize it, was just taking that narrative and really training it in my mind. And I want that to be an example and an encouragement for people that no matter what life is throwing at you, whether it's your fault or not your fault, you are a good person, and please say nice things to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Thank you so much. If you want to visit our website, please visit our website at stormchamp.com. There we have links to all of our past episodes and links to our social media and links to iTunes and Spotify too to download the podcast. Danielle, thank you so much for spending time with us tonight. We really, really appreciate it. And we'll make sure we send folks your way to the Suddenly Single podcast.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.